Close your eyes. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning to the news that the price of gold has fallen. Not because a new mine has been discovered, not because governments printed too much money, not because banks collapsed, but because one man arrived in your city. Not with an army, not to wage war, not to conquer kingdoms. He simply came on pilgrimage. Yet everywhere he went, gold flowed like water. He gave it to the poor. He handed it to merchants. He rewarded scholars. He showered officials with gifts. And before long, markets began to change. The value of gold itself fell. Years later, people were still talking about what had happened. Contemporary writers in Egypt recorded that the sudden influx of gold depressed its value, though modern historians continue to debate the scale and duration of the effect. Now imagine this happened, not in London, not in Paris, not in Beijing, not in Washington, but in the year 1324, and the man responsible was African. His name was Mansa Musa. But this is not a story about the richest man who ever lived. It is the story of the civilization that made such wealth possible. Long before Europe crossed the Atlantic, long before the great age of European empire, West Africa was already connected to the wider world across the vast Sahara Desert. Thousands of camels crossed scorching sands every year, not carrying tourists, not carrying soldiers, but carrying commerce. Southward came salt, northward went gold, and somewhere between these two worlds, a kingdom became an empire. Its name was Mali. The empire did not become powerful by accident. It controlled some of the richest gold-producing regions in the medieval world and sat aside the trans-Saharan trade routes that linked West Africa to North Africa and beyond. Gold, salt, taxation, and strategic geography all contributed to its extraordinary prosperity. If you have lived in medieval Europe, there was a good chance that some of the gold in your coins had begun its journey in West Africa. You may never have heard the name Mali, but you almost certainly benefited from it. By the early 14th century, Mali stretched across a vast territory in West Africa. Its influence reached over parts of what are today Mali, Guinea, Senegal, Mauritania, the Gambia, and neighboring regions. It controlled major trade corridors and exercised influence over important cities such as Timbuktu and Gao during its period of expansion. This was not a loose collection of villages, it was a sophisticated state. Taxes were collected, trade was regulated, justice was administered. Merchants traveled with remarkable confidence. When the Moroccan traveler Ibn Battuta visited Mali a few decades later, he praised the empire's security and remarked that travelers had little to fear from robbers, an indication of the state's administrative strength. But then, something unexpected happened. The emperor disappeared from history. According to later historical accounts, Mansa Musa's predecessor, often identified as Abu Bakr II in popular retellings, though the evidence is debated, was said to have abdicated after launching an expedition into the Atlantic Ocean in search of what lay beyond the horizon. The story comes from Mansa Musa himself, as reported by the Syrian historian Al-Humari, but historians continue to debate exactly who the predecessor was and how literally the account should be taken. And so, the throne passed to Mansa Musa. History has a strange habit. It remembers the man at the top, but often forgets the system beneath him. When people hear the name Mansa Musa, they think of unimaginable wealth, gold, camels, palaces, pilgrimage, but very few stop to ask a simple question: where did all this wealth come from? Did it appear overnight? Did one man simply wake up and become the richest ruler on earth? No. Empires are not built in a lifetime. They are built over generations. Mansa Musa inherited something extraordinary, not merely gold. He inherited organization, he inherited order, he inherited a kingdom that had mastered the art of commerce. Imagine the Sahara. Today, many people think of it as an empty desert, a place of endless sound, a place that separates civilization. But in the Middle Ages, the Sahara did the opposite. It connected them. It was the world's greatest highway, not for cars, not for trains, but for camels. Thousands upon thousands of camels cross the desert every year, each caravan carrying salt, cloth, copper, ivory, books, ideas, and most importantly, gold. If you wanted West African gold, you had to pass through Mali, and if you passed through Mali, you paid taxes on goods, taxes on trades, taxes on caravan. The empire did not merely possess wealth, it understood it. It understood that controlling trade could be even more powerful than controlling minds. That lesson would later make Mali one of the richest states on earth. Let me tell you something astonishing. During the 14th century, West Africa produced an enormous share of the gold that entered the Mediterranean world. Historians caution against assigning an exact percentage, but many agree that the region's gold fields were among the most productive known to Afro-Eurasian trade network at the time. The goods traveled north, across the Sahara, into North Africa, into Europe, into the Middle East. Kings minted coins with it, merchants finalized business with it, empires measured their fortunes with it, and much of it had passed through Mali. The empire controlled important gold-producing regions such as Bambouk and Bure. But here is what fascinates me. Gold alone did not make Mali powerful. If that were true, every country with natural resources would automatically become prosperous. History tells us otherwise. Mali became powerful because it combined resources with leadership, with institutions, with trade, with geography. It sat exactly where the world's most valuable trade routes met. Sometimes, history rewards those who understand location. Mali understood it perfectly. Then came the journey that would make Mansa Musa famous across continents. The year was 1324. Every Muslim who is physically and financially able is encouraged to perform the pilgrimage to Mecca at least once in a lifetime. For Mansa Musa, this was more than an act of worship. It became a statement, not of pride, but of presence. For centuries, much of the outside world knew little about the kingdoms south of the Sahara. That was about to change. Mansa Musa assembled a caravan unlike anything most people had ever seen. Contemporary descriptions vary, but they consistently portrayed an immense procession that included attendants, officials, soldiers, servants, and camels carrying large quantities of gold. Later retellings often give precise numbers, such as 60,000 people or 100 camel loads, but historians treat many of those figures cautiously because they come through layers of reporting rather than direct counting. Even without the largest estimates, the spectacle was unforgettable. Imagine standing outside Cairo. You hear the caravan before you see it. The sound of footsteps, camel bells, voices carried by the desert wind. Then, a line appears on the horizon. Not dozens, not hundreds, but a procession stretching farther than the eye can comfortably follow. The richest ruler many would ever witness was approaching. When Mansa Musa entered Cairo, people noticed, not because he demanded attention, but because attention naturally followed him. The ruler of Mali met with the Mamluk Sultan, Al-Nasser Muhammad. The visit was recorded by contemporary writers, including Al-Humari, who later gathered eyewitness accounts from people who had seen or interacted with the members of Muta's entourage. One story appears again and again. Gold everywhere. Mansa Musa gave generously to scholars, to officials, to the poor, to religious institutions, to merchants. His generosity became legendary, but generosity has consequences. The sudden increase in the amount of gold circulating in Cairo is widely reported to have reduced its value for a period afterwards. Modern economic historians generally agree that his spending affected local gold markets, although they debate the precise magnitude and how long the effects lasted. Think about that for a moment. One visitor, one pilgrimage, one ruler, and an entire city's monetary system felt the impact, not because he stole, not because he conquered, but because he gave too much away. Imagine you are the richest ruler on earth. You have so much gold that anyone can count. Every city welcomes you. Every ruler wants to meet you. Every merchant hopes you will buy from him. Then suddenly, something unexpected happens. The price of gold begins to fall, not because of war, not because of famine, not because new mines have been discovered, but because you have given away so much of it. According to medieval accounts, the generosity of Mansa Musa during his stay in Cairo increased the total supply of gold so dramatically that its value declined. Whether the effect lasted several years or a shorter period remains debated, but contemporary observers agreed that it was significant. Then comes one of history's greatest ironies. The richest man in the world needed to borrow money. Not because he was poor, not because he had run out of gold, but because he was trying to correct the very problem his generosity had created. Historical accounts describe Mansa Musa borrowing gold in Cairo before departing, paying high interest to withdraw gold from circulation. Some historians interpret this as an early attempt to stabilize the local markets, while others caution that the details come from later reports and should be treated carefully. Think about that. 700 years ago, an African emperor was making decisions that today would be discussed in economic classrooms. Money, supply, demand, market value. The language was different. The principles were the same. When Mansa Musa finally completed the pilgrimage to Mecca, something remarkable happened. The journey ended. The legend began. Before his pilgrimage, many outside Africa knew very little about the Mali Empire. Afterwards, its name appeared in chronicles, in diplomatic discussions, in merchant conversations, on maps. One of the most famous medieval maps ever produced, the Catalan Atlas of 1375, depicts Mansa Musa seated on a throne, crowned, holding a large golden nugget in his hand. Whether the illustration reflects literal reality is beside the point. It shows how famous he had become in the Mediterranean world within decades of his reign. Imagine that. A European cartographer who had never met Mansa Musa still believed that if he wanted to represent Africa, he had to draw him. Not anonymous, not forgotten, not invisible, recognized, respected, powerful. Africa was on the map, quite literally. When people hear about Mansa Musa, they usually remember one thing: gold. But wealth was never his greatest achievement. His greatest achievement was what he did with it. He invested in faith, he invested in learning, he invested in cities. He supported the construction and expansion of mosques, educational institutions, and public buildings across the empire. Historical traditions associate him with inviting the Andalusian architect Abu Ishaq al-Shaili to Mali. Though historians continue to debate the extent of al-Shaili's architectural contributions, Timbuktu, already an important trading town, began to grow into one of the greatest intellectual centers of the Islamic world. Scholars came, judges came, merchants came, books came, ideas came. Knowledge became one of Mali's greatest exports, and if episode 1 taught us anything, it is that great universities do not appear overnight. They are built, protected, funded, encouraged. The flourishing intellectual life of Timbuktu rested on generations of political stability, trade, scholarship, and patronage. History remembers libraries. Someone first had to finance them. Now, we arrive at the question everyone asks: was Mansa Musa the richest man in history? The honest answer is that no one can know for certain. Comparing the wealth of rulers who lived hundreds or thousands of years apart is extraordinarily difficult. Modern measures of wealth, national economies, currencies, and assets simply did not exist in the same way. What historians can say is this: Mansa Musa ruled one of the wealthiest empires of the medieval world. He controlled access to immensely valuable gold resources. His pilgrimage displayed extraordinary riches. His wealth astonished contemporaries, and centuries later, people still struggle to describe it. Perhaps that tells us everything we need to know. Sometimes, history is not remembered because someone owned the most. It is remembered because the world could not stop talking about them. But before we leave, there is one more question. How did all this become possible? Empire do not simply appear. Trade routes are not created overnight. Institutions do not build themselves. Somewhere, long before Mansa Musa, someone laid the foundation. Someone united kingdoms. Someone defeated an empire that seemed impossible to defeat. Someone imagined the future that others thought impossible. His name was Sundiata Keita. When he was a child, people laughed at him. Some believed he would never work. Yet history would remember him as the founder of the Mali Empire. Without Sundiata, there is no Mali. Without Mali, there is no Mansa Musa. Without Mansa Musa, there is no golden age of Timbuktu. One man's courage created the condition of another man's greatness, and that is where our next story begins. This is Unravelling Africa. If this story changed the way you think about Africa's past, help someone else discover it. Like this video, share it, and subscribe to this channel, because history does not disappear. Sometimes it is simply waiting for someone to tell it again. I am Olufolaji Akinowo, Eleniyan. I will see you in the next episode.